You're watching the legal breakdown. So, Glenn, Trump reposted onto Truth Social a swipe against Alvin Bragg's wife. That's the Manhattan District Attorney. Now, he did this as he's awaiting arraignment in a trial being prosecuted by Alvin Bragg. So, what impact could this have? And is it more likely that we could see a gag order against Trump now?
Yeah, this is really interesting and it's getting into dangerous territory because when you look at these reposts, right? A journalist found some information about Alvin Bragg's wife posting that, Donald Trump is a racist. Donald Trump should be held accountable for his crimes, not exactly, late breaking news to anyone.
Right.
But after the reporter posted this information about Bragg's wife, Donald Trump started reposting it. Now, there's nothing in it in and of itself that would constitute a threat or that arguably would be improper. But we know Donald Trump's MO. He starts to put names in the public square, and the signal he is sending is that this person is a problem to me. What does that inspire some of his followers, the least among his followers to do? Well, we know it can incite them to violence. So he knows what he's doing. He hasn't done anything that is directly actionable yet, but boy, he's sending that dangerous signal. And, he's got priors. He's done this kind of thing before. So I think all of this now may become sort of fodder for discussion at Donald Trump's first court appearance.
How does this work in the sense that what he did may not in and of itself be a crime, but how do the circumstances play into this? Is there some degree of circumstantial evidence that could show that what he was trying to do by virtue of, doing something that's not necessarily in and of itself a crime, but where the intention is to cause her violence? Does that have any impact here?
The First Amendment does come into play here, right? The First Amendment protections are broad, are sweeping, and that's precisely the way we want them to be. The problem is when you have a guy like Trump who has demonstrated a pattern, throw names into the public square, hoping that it inspires something that will then inure to his benefit, and may inure to the danger of the person he's naming, it becomes a really murky area. What can a judge do to try to push back or perhaps put a gag order in place to direct the defendant, stop posting about the prosecutor's family? I think that's fair game, even though I'll tell you, Brian, in my 30 years, I never encountered this kind of stuff that we're now seeing with Donald Trump. Certainly, I never encountered it with a public official like Donald Trump. There were circumstances when we thought people were saying some things that might endanger a witness in the case, but this is Donald Trump taking it to a whole nother level. So, I think this arraignment hearing coming up for Trump is going to be unlike one we've ever seen before because of the novel issues that the prosecutor, the defense attorney, and the judge are going to have to wrestle with.
Well, with that said, you mentioned the judge in this case. Donald Trump also attacked the judge online. What impact could that have then?
Yeah, this is a really interesting development because Donald Trump posted something about Judge Marshawn, who is the presiding judge. In his case, he was also the presiding judge in the criminal prosecution of the Trump Organization, a case in which Allen Weisselberg, Donald Trump's chief financial officer, testified for the prosecution, even though Allen Weisselberg was no friend of the prosecution. He kind of had one foot in the DA's office and one foot in the Trump Organization. So Donald Trump posted about Judge Marshawn the following. He said, Judge Marshawn hates me. That's obviously a lie. He said, Alvin Bragg handpicked Judge Marshawn to be the presiding judge in Trump's criminal prosecution. That's a lie. That's not the way judges are assigned to cases. And he said, and Judge Marshawn railroaded Allen Weisselberg, my chief financial officer, into pleading guilty by basically threatening him. Again, another lie. So I am certain this is going to become the topic of discussion at Donald Trump's arraignment. You cannot make these wild, outrageous lies, throw them into the public square, and hope that they sort of blow up and poison the jury well. So there's something called recusal, right? When a judge has an interest in a case, he or she is supposed to recuse themselves, remove themselves from the case. If you have, for example, a family member involved in a case, well, then you as the judge can't preside over that case. If you have a financial interest involving one of the parties in the case, the judge can't preside over that kind of a case. It feels like Donald Trump is trying to tell so many inflammatory lies about Judge Marshawn that he's hoping maybe Judge Marshawn will remove himself, will have to recuse from the case. But here's the thing. Defendants don't get to orchestrate their judge. Think
Yeah.
about it. If a defendant could make outrageous lies about a judge, and then that judge was ethically obligated to remove himself from the case and have a new judge appointed, well, wouldn't that just inspire defendants to engage in precisely this kind of conduct? But here's what it might do, Brian. I think these lies, this disinformation, this propaganda, really designed to turn the people against Judge Marshawn and against the prosecution, I think ups the ante that Judge Marshawn will impose a gag order, will impose some kind of a narrowly tailored set of restrictions, the do's and don'ts of Donald Trump's speech and Donald Trump's posts. I frankly think it's essential at this point, because if you let it go unaddressed, the way we've let so many other things Donald Trump has done go unaddressed, it's going to get worse, more inflammatory, more inciting, and more dangerous.
Well, that of course raises the question, what happens if and when Donald Trump breaks any gag order that was imposed upon him? What are the consequences of that?
So the judge better not flinch. When a judge sets conditions for a defendant and the defendant intentionally violates those conditions, the judge has every right, indeed every responsibility, to then ratchet up the conditions. And the ultimate in a pretrial condition is pretrial detention, jailing a defendant pending trial because the defendant has proved they're unwilling to comply with lesser restrictions designed to promote public safety and give the people a right to a fair trial. Now, listen, a defendant does not have a right to poison the jury pool, because the defendant has a right to a fair trial, but the people also have a right to a fair trial.
Okay, now I want to skip ahead a little bit here, and this is a question that I've been throwing around with myself, and it's skipping a bunch of steps, but game this one out with me. What happens if Trump is incarcerated at any point in this process, not necessarily just for the Manhattan DA's case, but just in any of these cases that are bearing down on him? What happens with the Secret Service? Like if Trump is incarcerated, given that they have to be with him at all times, do they get locked up with him?
It's a great question. And the thing is, because it's unprecedented, because these are uncharted waters, no one can answer that question definitively. Now, I've poked around with some of my friends at the Bureau of Prisons and the U.S. Marshal Service, and here is the best answer that I can come up with. And I think it's a leading contender. So, I put a lot of defendants in secure confinement facilities because they were cooperators. I had a hitman who killed 7 people for a criminal organization, and that hitman flipped and testified for us. And we had to keep that hitman safe pending trial, but we obviously also had to keep that hitman locked up. So there are facilities, I won't name them or say where they are. There are facilities in the United States that are designed to house only cooperating witnesses, where somebody who is in extreme danger because of the assistance he's providing to the government can also be confined safely. There's no reason that can't be done for Donald Trump. I could envision, if a former president of the United States is ordered confined, is sentenced to prison, I could see them actually housing him in one of these facilities and housing only him, keeping all other inmates in other facilities. Here's the other thing that I've learned in talking with some of my colleagues and former colleagues at the Bureau of Prisons and the Marshal Service. It may very well be that the Secret Service will enter into a memorandum of understanding with BOP, the Federal Bureau of Prisons, and the U.S. Marshal Service, which is the agency that handles long-term witness protection issues, to turn over the security detail and the security duties of a former president from the Secret Service to the BOP and the U.S. Marshals, and arrange for this unprecedented situation to be handled that way.
Got it. Because the flip side of that is, like, imagine being the poor sucker who spent his whole life working his way up to be on the presidential detail in the Secret Service, and you end up sitting in a prison cell with the guy because he couldn't not commit crimes.
Not going to happen. They are not going to subject Secret Service officers to, 8-hour shifts in a Federal Bureau of Prisons facility. I do not see that happening.
Yeah. All right. Well, obviously that's something that we'll keep a close eye on. For anybody watching, to keep on top of all of this legal news, whether it's in the Manhattan DA's case or any other case that we're contending with right now, make sure to follow both of our channels. The links are right here on the screen. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
And I'm Glenn Kirshner.
You're watching The Legal Breakdown.